And at the same time, I started just posting some videos on TikTok, like testing my blood sugar. Is 450 high? And I'm trying Lantus for the first time. This is how I do it. Because I found it interesting. This was all new to me. So I was like, why don't I just put this out into the world? Because there's probably people going through the same thing. Anyway, these videos kind of blew up with a ton of comments of people saying, you need to get a CGM, you need to get a pump, you have type 1, you need to get an endo. And right after I started getting these messages, I got an endo and I got the C-peptide test and I was officially diagnosed with type 1. So I completely attribute this diagnosis from the community that I found on TikTok that I didn't even know existed.
Welcome to the Reclaim Your Rise podcast. My name is Lauren Bongiorno, nationally board certified health coach and founder and CEO of Risely Health, where we help people and families impacted by type 1 diabetes take ownership over their lives so that they can transform with more freedom and confidence. Everyone has a different reason to be here. You might be seeking knowledge, support, or community, but at your core, I know that you long for something deeper. You're here for transformation. And that's what the Reclaim Your Rise podcast is all about. A quick reminder before we start the show that nothing you hear on the Reclaim Your Rise podcast should be a substitute for personalized professional medical advice. Please always consult your physician or other medical professional before making any changes to your diet, insulin dosages, or healthcare plan. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Reclaim Your Rise. The soundbite that you just heard is from today's guest, who I am certain you are going to love. I'm not happy that he got diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, but if anybody was going to, he is the personality and the energy that we need in this community. Justin Eastzer, also known on his podcast and social media as Diabetic, is so knowledgeable about the latest and greatest in diabetes technology. That's like what he's known for, but he's also really open about his experiences living with type 1 diabetes over the past 3 years. So in this episode, we get into a lot. You're going to hear us talk about how a tragic health diagnosis at the age of 21 prepared him really for his type 1 diabetes diagnosis years later. The low blood sugar incident that he had that made him terrified of insulin in the months after. We go into all of the diabetes tech advancements that he's been geeking out over and what he's really excited is coming down the pipeline. I personally learned a lot during that part of the conversation. And it was also interesting to hear why he chose the DIY loop route instead of going on a commercial insulin pump. And we also touched on long COVID, and that was interesting because I know it is very niche and not something that maybe a lot of people do experience, but for the people who have experienced long COVID, I know there's not much of a community, not many resources, especially in long COVID and type 1 diabetes. So Justin shares how it's impacted his mental health, his energy, and just his overall diabetes over the past 11 months. So I really enjoyed this episode. I know you are going to as well. So without further ado, help me welcome Justin Eastzer to the show, and let's rise. Justin Eastzer, aka Justin Tech, in the house. Hello, my friend. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to talk with you today.
I know we've had some alone time out, if you will. Like when we had our November Together T1D event last year, you were one of the live guests in New York City in the studio. And so we got to spend some quality time there. And that was like the first time we really, I feel like I got to know you, and now we're going to go even deeper today. So I'm pumped.
Yeah, that was awesome. I actually had a bunch of people like reach out and be like, I saw you on that. And like, now I follow you both. And, it's great to watch both of our content. So
Yeah, absolutely. So with the start of every episode, I like to ask guests our anchor question. So I'm going to ask you, in the name of the title, Reclaiming Your Rise, it's all about rising above our challenges, rising above our diagnosis. So can you share with us a story of a time that you reclaimed your rise with type 1 diabetes?
Yeah, I think like basically what I'm doing and what I have been doing since my diagnosis with creating content and educating, I think the way I've reclaimed my rise with my type 1 diabetes is by taking a weakness that can be something that could be perceived as a weakness and using it as my strength. So with all of my content, I try to take this illness that I have and use the experiences that I have, the scary experiences, the anxiety experiences, and turn those into lessons that I can then teach others with so that they feel less alone. And I didn't realize the power of that. Initially, I was kind of just doing it on TikTok and social media. And then when I realized that it was helping people through receiving messages, I was like, this is something that I can continue to do. So I think
Mm.
I'm reclaiming my rise every day and also trying to help other people do it too, so that they feel, making them feel less alone.
And it's a very full circle thing for you to do because that's how you were essentially diagnosed in a way. Like other people on social media who were living with type 1 diabetes shared their stories and their experiences with you to say, and I'll let you, share the story yourself, but like, hey, you don't have type 2 diabetes, you actually have type 1. So, I would love for you to share what your type 1 diabetes diagnosis was like in 2020 because it was, recent-ish.
Yeah, so it was 2 years ago in May, but the journey kind of started a year prior. So I had had some elevated blood sugar levels. My doctor says, "You have diabetes." That's all he said. "You have diabetes, and I'm giving you metformin." I was like, "What diabetes?" And then I left. Like, I was so in shock that I didn't know what to ask. And I left. I was like, "Well, aren't there multiple types of diabetes? Like, which one do I have?" And so I kind of just went for maybe like 6 months taking the metformin, and my symptoms at first were a bit relieved. Like, I wasn't peeing as much and I wasn't feeling as terrible at night. And that only lasted a few months. The metformin helped for a second, and then it started to get worse again. I was feeling horrendous. My friends were like, "You look skinny." And at first I was like, "Thank you so much." And they were like, "No, you look sick skinny." And so I weighed myself. I realized I had lost 20 pounds. And this was in the height of COVID. And at that point, I was like eating really unhealthy. Like, I was really just trying to make myself happy and eating fast food. So I thought to myself, I'm like not in good health. Like, I'm like, I've gained weight, whereas I hadn't. So it came to a point where I had to get a new doctor to get more answers. So I went to a different doctor in the practice, and he still kept me as like a type 2 diagnosis, but he increased my metformin and also put me on long acting insulin. So, and he also was like, "You need to test your blood sugar 3 times a day." So I started doing all of that. And at the same time, I started just posting some videos on TikTok, like testing my blood sugar. Is 450 high? And
Mm.
I'm trying Lantus for the first time. This is how I do it, because I found it interesting. This was all new to me. So I was like, why don't I just put this out into the world? Because there's probably people going through the same thing. Anyway, these videos kind of blew up with a ton of comments of people saying, "You need to get a CGM, you need to get a pump, you have type 1, you need to get an endo." And right after I started getting these messages, I got an endo and I got the C peptide test, and I was officially diagnosed with type 1. So I completely attribute this diagnosis from the community that I found on TikTok that I didn't
Mm.
even know existed.
Well, my mind automatically hearing that story, what it goes to is you seem like a very optimistic person. Like, there's not many people that I think would get a diagnosis and then be like, I'm going to go post on it about it on social media. And I'm curious with that optimism, was it maintained throughout the actual type of diagnosis when you did ultimately get that? Or were you deflated because you recognized the differences between type 1 and type 2 once you got that? What was that like?
Well, I think I need to give you a little background on why I felt so comfortable putting myself out there. I was a tech YouTuber at the time, so I was already a host
Mm.
on YouTube talking about technology. And then just in general, like, I am a very outward person. I feel comfortable being vulnerable with people, strangers, because I know people have difficulty with that, and that when they hear that, it can really resonate. So when I was diagnosed with diabetes, it just felt natural to talk about what I was going through and show off this what I thought was really cool technology that I had never used before and was very new to me. I just have this urge to like teach people and show people things. So it just really kind of fell into place. I was like, all right, well, like, why don't I just make some content on this? And I even got some words of encouragement. I did like an update video on my Justin Tech YouTube channel, my tech, where I did like tech reviews about my diabetes diagnosis. And I had a ton of comments say, like, Justin, you should look at diabetes tech for reporting. So with that encouragement, I felt, more passion to kind of do it. And I found that the more vulnerable I was, the more helpful I was. And I am an optimist. I do always look at like the glass half full and try to find the silver lining of things. I also think that I had cancer when I was 21, and that completely changed my outlook on worst case scenario and like living every day to the fullest. So I think having had experienced that at such a young age and maturing so quickly, getting diabetes wasn't this like horrendous thing to me because I had already kind of like come close to death. And I already had like 5 people in my life who had type 1. So I already had this built in support system that I could reach out to on a personal level to ask questions about what I was going through. And I also got in touch with like my endo and my diabetes educator were just an incredible support system and also encouraged me to continue doing what I was doing on social media.
What type of cancer did you have?
It was called neuroblastoma, very rare for someone my age. Normally, children 2 and under have it. So it's a pediatric cancer. And it was a tumor on my spine. So they had to go through my stomach and like take out all my organs to remove it. And my hypothesis is like that's the reason I got diabetes, was like kind of the trauma to the pancreas, because I noticed after that surgery my blood sugar was slightly elevated with each kind of blood test I got. And I had doctors kind of say like, your blood sugar's a little elevated. Did you eat? And I was like, oh yeah, I did eat. Like I was still so young, like 22, 23, 24, that, I was like, it's probably fine, which having gone through that cancer experience, I really should have been more on top of it. But I just noticed it slowly degrading until it got to a point where I was feeling really sick, like 5 or 6 years later.
Hmm. So, I'm curious to know before the type 1 diagnosis, what you had this experience of cancer, you know what worst case scenario can be like. You probably also recognize the importance of your health. Would you say that was true? Like, did you start taking care of your health just generally more after the cancer that was already kind of like set up for the type 1 diabetes and made it a little bit easier? Or do you feel like it was like the cancer was, you recovered from it, and that was back to kind of regular life? Like, what was that health journey like in your 20s?
Yeah, no, it was a complete change in lifestyle after that. I was smoking cigarettes at the time, like a half a pack a day. So I quit
Mm.
smoking. In fact, it took me 9 months after having cancer to quit smoking. Like that's how difficult it is to quit smoking. I quit for a month and then I like fell back into it. Um, but then I got rid of it, which has been great. I started working out a lot more. I started eating very healthy. I started like caring about my body and taking whatever I could in life when it came to my health that I could control and taking control of it. So when I was diagnosed with diabetes, I kind of had the same mindset of like, I'm going to do the best I can, whatever's in my control to take care of myself and keep my diabetes, in the healthiest way that I can. So yeah, absolutely cancer like just made me an overall way more healthy person. I always say it's like the best and the worst thing that ever happened to me.
Mm.
So that's definitely helped with that. I think also one thing that helped on like a confidence level, like I think being diagnosed with diabetes later in age is easier in some ways because you've built coping mechanisms, you've built confidence, you've built maturity and independence. So having had all of those built up and then getting this diagnosis, it gave me the skills to be able to address it to the best of my ability.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes people can hear type 1s say a similar sentiment, right? Like, I got diagnosed and I was like, I'm going to take this, for what it is and just kind of like trudge on forward. And I think that can sometimes be mistaken for, we don't have bad days, or we don't get upset, or we, aren't affected emotionally by it, which is, I know because I can't imagine there's anybody that's not like this, but it's the furthest from the truth. So do you remember like an early on kind of like smack in the face moment where you just felt defeated by diabetes, or you felt overwhelmed, like early in that diagnosis, maybe first couple months after the correct diagnosis came?
Yeah, I can think of a couple things. I always get like emotional, so I'm gonna do my best not to. But they were like really tough moments. I do remember like the first time I went to pick up insulin. That was a traumatic experience, like getting that insulin and them telling me it needed to stay cold, and having that like I was like, well, I how do I go on a road trip? How do I live a normal life? It was just all happening so fast that like after I picked it up, I cried the entire way home in the car because I was just like, my life is forever changed. And that was really tough. Um, I think another moment that really hit me that I documented in real time and really resonated with people on TikTok was a low I had. It was Gay Pride in Palm Springs. So this would have been 4 or 5 months after my original diagnosis. And we ordered pizza, and the pizza like didn't come. Like it didn't come like 40 minutes, and it didn't come. And I pre-bolused when it said it was out for delivery. Out for delivery, that means 20, 30 minutes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, 40 minutes later and the pizza still wasn't there. And I started having anxiety before the pizza wasn't arriving, and then I started having a really bad low. And the tough part for me was that all of my friends were there having a great time, laughing, watching a show, partying, dancing, drinking. And I felt more alone than I ever had while being surrounded by some of my closest friends. And it was traumatizing. I cried. I got orange juice. The pizza arrived, and I didn't even feel comfortable eating the pizza. I just was drinking my orange juice, and I just like documented it in real time, because it was a real experience that I hadn't really experienced before at that point. And I think the way I grew, I always try to find like the way I grow in these experiences. What I realized in that moment was I needed to reach out to one of those friends that were there and ask them to just be with me and talk with me through it, and just be able to communicate like what I'm going through, because when your friends don't understand what's going on, it's even more isolating. I was surrounded by 3 of my best friends, and I felt more alone than ever, which shouldn't be the case. And they wouldn't want that for me. So that's kind of what I took from that experience.
And I even see parallels between that experience and the pharmacy experience that you shared, where number one, it's a you know, uh, lack of education in a way. There's a little bit element of missing of, okay, well, what do I do in this situation? And having okay, here's the first step, here's the here's the second step, here's the third step. If my insulin gets, it doesn't stay cold all the time, right? There's that piece, and there's also the having somebody to talk about the fears that are coming up with, because it can be really isolating when you're alone in your head and you're like, I have to be the one to figure this out. I think that's the piece that can be really just like weigh on a lot of people when they aren't as naturally open as you are, or myself as well, where it feels like it's heavy, because at the end of the day, like, it's up to you, it's your body, and like you have to trust in yourself to be able to solve these problems.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what drives me to do what I do even more, is because I know there are people out there that don't have the confidence to talk to their friends about this very much, and they internalize all of this, which can cause burnout and depression.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to share my experiences and be vulnerable. Like social media often is not real. And I am very real in my videos. I don't just show the good, I show the bad and the uneasy and the scary because I know other people out there are going through that on a daily basis. And also, when it comes to accessibility, I feel very privileged to have the diabetes care team that I had at diagnosis, the 5 friends with type 1 diabetes that I could go to. Um,
Mm.
and not everyone has that. Not everyone has that community, those resources. But being able to share that on social media and not create community, but gather the community that already exists and share that with my followers so that I make a video, then people comment, and then people start talking to each other. That makes me feel so amazing. Being able to like looking at people
Yeah.
helping each other, which is what like it all comes down to is just community. It keeps us healthy.
Yeah. And I think that, I was thinking about like 5, 6, 7 years ago when I first jumped on, social media and started talking about diabetes. It was, still in that stage where it was weird to kind of like comment on in like other people's posts. Like it was just kind of like, oh, like I don't want to like comment on this random person's post. And now it's just like so just like that's what we do. That's how we communicate. That's how we talk. And you're right. Like there are so many connections that can come out of that. And it's an important piece I think of diabetes care today is the online community and that resource that's available to so many people. So I want to circle back to the fear of fear of low blood sugar, fear of hypoglycemia that I imagine came out of that experience. When you were down in Florida, how did that impact you in mm, how you pre-bolus afterwards and months later or maybe even years later, how you went, if you're going somewhere when you have a lot of insulin on board, how did that show up for you?
Yeah, well, out of that experience, I don't remember a specific fear, but there's another experience that I had in Fire Island where I had a significant low. This was a year ago, but it was a year and a half into diagnosis about and that experience where I like fell to the ground and like bent my glasses and luckily yelled to a friend who came and like took
Oh,
care of me. No glucagon was needed. I mean, glucagon could have been used, but luckily I was able to like have a glass of orange juice before falling. But that experience for weeks, I'd say at least a month, I was afraid to give myself insulin. So I would underdose.
were you
Yeah.
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Were you drinking also?
Yeah.
Were you drinking?
Yeah.
Because I heard Fire
Yeah.
Island, and that's right in our neck of my neck of the woods, and so I know what goes on at Fire Island, and it's a
It
fun
was a
time. So I was
long,
curious to know
long
that.
day and lots of drinking and pizza, which, can complicate things with how long it takes to hit your bloodstream. So I don't know what went wrong. What I do know what happened is like I passed out watching a movie, like asleep. And I was so, because it was just a long day. And so I didn't really hear my Dexcom alerts. And it wasn't until I like finally felt like a vibrate on my wrist of a really bad low where Dexcom said low, which it's really low when it can't even measure it, like under
Right.
50. Um, that I knew I had to like I had just enough energy to get that orange juice, but it was so scary. For weeks I had like what I call like a minor form of PTSD, and
Mm-hmm.
it took time to feel more confident. I think having glucagon with me on trips helps, and also communicating to anyone I'm with on vacation. Hey everyone, this is my little glucagon. It gets snorted into my nose. It's always in my green travel bag. If I'm ever incoherent, please use that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I this might be an unpopular opinion, but I do believe it is healthy and good for every type 1 to experience some kind of situation like that where it's not, you pass out, but it's kind of like you get close to it. And I think it's important for a few reasons. Number one, it's important because you realize maybe for the first time, oh wait, like I'm not invincible and this is something actually I do have to be more on top of, and especially maybe when I'm drinking, like this can get dangerous because, if you were maybe even more intoxicated than you were, maybe you would have been passed out and not have waken up at all from that. So I think that number one, and number two, because you realize that you can come back from it, and that in the worst case scenario, when push comes to shove, like you were able to recover from that, like LOW, like really bad low. And it can help, just I think, people understand, like, a low doesn't mean like, or getting lower than like 90, or an arrow down doesn't mean danger is 100% going to happen. It just means, hey, this is what's going to happen, and we have to take steps to now bring our blood sugar back up.
Yeah, kind of going on what you're saying of like the 90 arrow down. I feel like it's also so important. It's so easy to get overwhelmed and overanalyze your sugar levels at all times because of the accessibility of it on your wrist, on your phone with CGMs. And I also feel
Mm-hmm.
like I try my best. It's hard because this is my job now. Like diabetes, I have my numbers right like behind me. Because I love that technology, but most people don't want their diabetes to be right in front of their faces in these numbers. But sometimes I let it be too part of my daily experience. And I like when I see 90 arrow down, it used to be easy for me to be like, oh my God, what do I do now? But I think it's so important
Mm-hmm.
to use the technology in a way that we are able to live in the moment and only address things when they need to be addressed, and not constantly think about our numbers, because that will affect your mental health and that won't let you enjoy moments as much as your friends are, which will then cause you to be sad, I think.
Yeah. And, it's safe to say that you were obsessed with diabetes tech. And the way that and I want to dive into this, I have a lot of things that I want to talk about with you, from like looping to just like tech advancements, since you've got diagnosed. But you remind me the equivalent, of what you do on social media, and also your lifestyle, where you pretty much have your blood sugars accessible to you at all time through like glowing colors, on your desk, to your Mac screen, having your blood sugar to the thing, in the background, like all these different ways of reading your blood sugar. And to me, that's the equivalent of a fitness influencer who is like in ripped shape, and she does that for a living, and that's all she does is like, or he does, like they work out 24/7, and you're like, I'm working a 9 to 5, and I'm doing this. And like, how do I, should I have that level of fitness or physique or whatnot? And I think just bringing everything back to like reality here, I think what you're doing is you're showing people the options, and you're showing people the benefits of all these different things, and that it's important for the community to say, oh, wow, I learned about this from Justin, and I want to ask my doctor about this, and I want to advocate for this. Or maybe, that too much of that isn't good for my mindset, but the ability, you're giving people the choice is really my takeaway from it is.
Yeah, I want to show everyone like what's available so they do talk to their doctors, because sometimes doctors will only recommend one thing and then they just do it. But there are so many options
Right.
on the table, and there are so many innovations happening. Like if you're about to get a new pump, well, why don't you maybe wait a second, because there's the world's smallest pump coming from Tandem at the end of the year. So maybe you shouldn't renew that pump lease just yet. So I try to
Mm-hmm.
show what's coming, where things could be going, because that could hopefully also just inspire hope. And then it's just also really important for me to disconnect, turn off social media for a weekend, turn off my little displays, um, for my own mental health. And I also try to just
Mm-hmm.
educate people on like, I'm showing you all the options, but no, you should not be using all of this all the time.
This episode is brought to you by Omnipod. Many people don't know this, which is why we've partnered with Omnipod to help spread the word. But did you know that if you're curious about trying the Omnipod 5 tubeless wearable system, you can do so with no commitment, no obligation, and even if your current pump is in warranty? Crazy, right? Omnipod truly wants to make it as easy as possible for you to test our new system out and see how great life can be with it. There are so many benefits, my two highlights being that the activity feature sets a temporary higher target for times where less insulin is needed, and it integrates with Dexcom G6 to automatically adjust insulin every 5 minutes. So if you want to get on a pump for the first time, or if you want to have more freedom without a tubed pump, you can see if you're eligible for a free trial by going to omnipod.com/rise. Fill out the quick form and they'll do the work to check insurance coverage for you. You can also view full safety information, instructions for use, and trial terms and conditions at omnipod.com/rise. Now, right back to the show. Right. Yeah. And I mean, I'm really excited. I saw you interview, I think, the CEO of Dexcom that talked about the direct blood sugar to watch coming at the end of 2023. And I'm someone who I don't have, and I want you to talk a little bit more about this, about what you know, but I don't have an Apple Watch because I never wanted to be staring at my blood sugar, like just like having it that accessible to me, because I have an obsessive like personality, and like too much of that can be not good for my mental health. But at the same time, I hate carrying my phone around with me all the time. Like I love the idea of getting a watch, having my blood sugar, and being able to go for a run and not have to have my phone with me, or going for a walk, or, just that trade-off to me is something that I'm considering when that does come out. But can you share a little bit about that, and just, whatever you know?
Yeah, I actually have a lot to say. So first of all, do think, like, I take off my Apple Watch often when I'm like, I just can't right now. I can't have these notifications. I can't be looking at my watch. So that's super important. And sometimes I think like maybe I don't need a watch, but when it comes to Dexcom Direct to Watch, that does make me want to wear one even more, because that means there's opportunity to leave your phone and not have to worry about connection, or just having your phone on you. It's nice to, I think my number one thing that I miss most is not having my phone on me. Going to Palm Springs and leaving my phone in the bedroom and running off. I miss that because phones can suck you in. So with Direct to Apple Watch, I think one of the most exciting parts about it is the fact that with Omnipod 5 and Tandem's T-Slim and their future Mobi pump, your Dexcom can talk directly to that and keep you in a closed loop automated insulin delivery system. So you can go on a walk. Those two devices are the CGM and the pump are going to talk together, and you'll have your numbers on your watch. The one thing we're missing currently to make it perfect would be the ability to have a Tandem app or an Omnipod app also direct to watch, because then you have everything you need. Currently, if you add the Dexcom Direct to Apple Watch, you're not going to be able to dose boluses with your Omnipod if you don't have anything with you. They are coming out with an iPhone app. That's why I think that it is possible for them to do an Apple Watch app that is direct to watch. The nice thing about their future, well, with T-Slim, you have the controls on that pump. So you can do everything and leave your phone at home. And the cool thing about Mobi has no screen. It's all meant to be controlled by a phone, but it also has a button on it that can dose in half units and units. So if you're on that walk, you don't have your phone, and you spontaneously want ice cream, you can do that. And then you can monitor your sugar levels with Dexcom. So Direct to Apple Watch has some pretty awesome, will have awesome abilities, or free you from your phone in many ways. But I think that there's still going to be innovation from the pump companies needed in order to make it the perfect system.
And for everyone listening, like, you have to understand how huge this is, because Justin, I know I work with a lot of the diabetes tech companies on like a partnership level. So do you. And you know how much red tape there is, and how much like FDA clearance is needed to get like the smallest thing pushed forward. And so I feel like a lot of the, community for the longest time were like, but we can see it. Like, we just want it to go directly to the watch, or this to happen or this to happen. Like, why can't they just make it happen overnight? So the fact that we're actually seeing this ability to be able to dose from a non-pump tech device is so huge, because of so many liability reasons that they probably had to get over those hurdles.
Yeah, I think Dexcom's been talking about Direct Apple Watch for like 3 years now, 2 or 3 years, and it's finally happening. And kind of to your point, that's why the DIY community exists, because there is a large group of very smart people that know that the industry can do better, and they're like, okay, let's just build it ourselves. And they're actually the reason for how closed loop systems have come to be with Omnipod 5 and T-Slim's Control Q. those wouldn't exist. Those would have taken much longer to exist had the DIY community not done it by themselves.
And you jumped into the DIY looping very early, right? At what point in your diagnosis did you say, screw the commercial,
Yeah.
pumps? I'm going to just go straight to DIY.
Yeah, it was a fast one. So I was diagnosed officially in May. I started on the InPen Smart Insulin Pen a couple months later. And then I got on Omnipod by October. And then in November, I started on Loop after a month of Omnipod. It's recommended, I'd say. I was recommended that I be on Omnipod for a month just to understand how it works, basals, boluses, get those settings kind of down, and then get on Loop and kind of figure out the settings on Loop, because it's not as easy as just like transitioning to the other one with the same settings. There's tweaking that needs to happen.
So do you see yourself as like a forever looper right now, or do you have any kind of like, oh, if this happened, then I would switch, or you have your eyesight on anything?
It's hard to say because Loop is always ahead of the game. They're always coming out with features that are not existent on other systems. For example, I can bolus from my Apple Watch. I can create any custom override I want to. So on like the traditional systems like Omnipod and Tandem, you have like an activity mode. Well, I can create 5 different activity modes, one for biking, one for walking, one for weightlifting, and I can adjust the basal insulin by like decrease it by 20% or increase it by 20% when I'm high. I can also change my ranges of where I want my blood sugar to go. So I feel way more safe using Loop than any system on the market that's FDA cleared. What would change that for me is if one of the big companies were able to come out with something that were better, possibly like a bihormonal or even trihormonal pump, which either like a glucagon insulin pump that can truly like keep you in range, or glucagon insulin and amylin. Amylin slows down your digestion. It's something that exists in normal people's bodies. So having all 3 of those hormones, I just learned what amylin was yesterday, talking to Gary Shiner.
You're like, wait, why am I hungry? You're like, why am I hungry all the time?
Yeah.
Oh, wait.
So, if they were able to do that, Beta Bionics is working on that. That could change the game. And also there's Tidepool Loop, which is an FDA cleared system of DIY Loop that was cleared by the FDA, but it's currently not available on any pump right now, even though it is interoperable. It is built to work with any pump that exists. The pump company just needs to allow it.
Yeah. So for people who this is the first time they're hearing about looping and they're like, wait, why have I never heard about this? This sounds amazing. It really does sound amazing. And it's so funny because I've probably shared this on the pod before, but a couple of years ago, when I was living in New York City, I somebody convinced me to buy the Riley Link, and it sat in my closet for like 2 years. And that is pretty like comparable to my personality and like anything else tech. Like tech is like not my strong suit. Even like getting on this podcast, right? Like something was wrong with my mic and I was like, Justin, literally, I'm so sorry. Like I have to get my podcast producer like to help with this, Amy. And you're like, no, Lauren, like just show me the controls, show me, and you fix it in like 2 seconds. And I'm like, I literally was having a panic attack because I can't even like the remote. Like if something goes wrong with the input on the TV, I'm like, okay, I'm just not watching TV for a week until somebody else fixes it. So, the downside of it, in my opinion, is that you have to be somebody who is like very invested in customizing everything. If something goes wrong, troubleshooting, like there is no 1-800 number that you can call. Yes, I imagine, and I know that there are Facebook groups and communities that you can kind of support, but would you say that that's the main thing, the main downside, that why people don't necessarily go on Loop? Or
look, if you want to get on Loop, you need to spend 2 hours reading a website. And that's the blockade for a lot of people. They may not want to devote the time, the 2 hours it is to just understand it. Because other systems, you just get on it and you have a diabetes educator help you. There are educators out there that are willing to And there are also many that aren't willing to, that like are like, nope, I'm not going to work with you on that. And I think that's really sad. I think that
Yeah.
educators should work with their patients and what their desires are. They can't tell people to use Loop, but they can help people who are using Loop. There's a Facebook group that if you have in the 2 years I've used Loop, I've had 2 issues of just like it's not working. And it was also like
Mm-hmm.
user error. It was like I did something weird. So I go to the Facebook group that exists. I type out what happens. Within 1 minute, I have a resolution. That is how
Mm.
active these users are and how supportive they are. People on Omnipod 5, their receivers are dying. They're having the same issue. In fact, though, then they can't even use their Omnipod because the receiver died. So, like, it's you can't say that Loop has any more issues than a main system. But yes, there is no company that is liable for this. You are completely liable. You build the app. But no, I'd say you really don't have to be very tech savvy. They lay it out very well on the website. And it took me, yes, I'm a tech savvy person. It took me under 5 hours
Mm.
from reading about it, building the app, and then working with someone to help me get my settings down. So
Yeah.
there are lots of resources out there to help you build it. But yeah, I understand that people feel a risk factor there. So it's completely understandable why people wouldn't want to use it.
And I think it's the same feeling from somebody who is on a commercial pump thinking about, oh, wait, maybe I want to do looping. The same fears that come up, I think, are very similar to the fears of somebody who's on MDI, multiple daily injections, thinking about going on a pump, right? It's the unknown, it's the steps that need to be taken. And to your point, yeah, like I've been on a tubed pump, I've been on, a tubeless pump, and we have coaches on our team who are cover all the different pumps, and like we all have issues because it's technology, and at the end of the day, like technology is not perfect. It's not going to be just seamless from the second that you put it on. So it's just choosing, yeah, like how risk like tolerant are you,
Yeah, actually,
and where do you want to place your
I
risk?
just interviewed my friend Jenna on my podcast. She switched from Medtronic to Omnipod, and she was been on Medtronic for over 15 years. And what she told me was that at first, when she switched, she was so more hyper focused on her diabetes than she has been in 20 years. And she was like,
Mm.
she was so apprehensive switching for so long because when you switch treatment, you have to confront your illness. You have to confront this reality that you have kind of put on the background for so long. And all of these treatments are an imperfect solution. They're not, they're not they're not a pancreas. So I understand why people don't want to switch from what they're on, but I also try to show people what's out there and what things can do so that they can go into switching or trying new things in some sort of educated way, knowing what exists so that they can go to their providers and be like, I want this because of this, this, and this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, advocate, and I think that's the thing too. It's never good when you get comfortable, or when you don't change something that's not serving you just because you don't want to get uncomfortable, right? That's always something to reflect on. Is anything new, anything different that can have so much potential upside and gain is going to feel uncomfortable. It's just recognizing that that's the thing that's holding you back. So, what tech advancements do you feel like you're geeking out over right now? Like, is there one that comes to mind that like this year, past 6 months, you're like, oh, like that was, that was really, really, really cool. And I love diving into it.
Yeah. Well, I think that there's like a really bright future that I've learned a lot about like what's coming or what could be coming. Medtronic is acquiring a South Korean company that produces the pump EOFlow, and that is a tubeless pump. Then there is Tandem, who in January of 2023 acquired a company called AMF Medical that produces a pump called Sigi, a tubeless pump, SIGI. That is another tubeless pump. So the fact that more companies are coming into the tubeless market is just going to drive innovation. It's going to put flames underneath Omnipod, because Omnipod's going to need to innovate in their own ways to stand out in front of these two pumps that will be coming in the future. They are actively talking about them. And I've interviewed multiple people from these companies about their future pumps. And so I'm very eager to see what's happening with that. What I like that I'm seeing is more CGM interoperability. So you've got the Dexcom G6 that's already working with multiple pumps outside of Medtronic. Then you've got the G7 support coming to Tandem and Omnipod. And then you've got Libre 2 support coming to those two pumps as well. It's a Libre 2 sensor that doesn't require scanning. It was rebuilt so that it can just do closed loop. So more options, less expensive options. And then it's only a matter of time that we see the Libre 3 come. And the Libre 3 has a lot of positives to it. It's smaller than the G7, and it has better connection from afar, which is something that people are going to notice, I think, when they switch over to G7. That's something I'm actually disappointed with. I love the G7. I think the G7 is such a huge advancement in so many ways. It's so small, I don't even know it's there. But the one major issue I have with it is connection issues. I can't be more than 10 feet away from my phone without it disconnecting. And
oh wow, that's even worse than
oh
the
yeah, it's worse than the G6. I used to be able to walk around my apartment and stay connected. Now with the G7, I can't do that. I know that they're working to fix that, but that's obviously not ideal. And I hope to see that be fixed in the future.
Yeah. So everyone who's on current pumps that only connect with G6 and not G7 yet, don't rush. I think what Justin's saying too, like just stay on G6 and let them work the kinks out, and then hopefully the G7, once those kinks are worked out, it'll connect with the pumps that you're on. So you're so well versed in all the things going on in the tech world. All of that I feel like is just so valuable that you shared. So thank you so much. I want to shift to the last topic that I want to talk to you about, because I think it's very, very unique. And I don't think a lot of people will relate to it, but for people who are going through this, I think it's really important that it's discussed, because it impacts such a small group of people, and then also people with type 1 diabetes. So I want to talk about long COVID. Nicole, who is an alumni of Risley Coaching, who was also at the in-person event last year speaking on the panel, she also has long COVID. And when she after meeting you, she was like, oh my gosh, I haven't met another type 1 that had this. So can you share a little bit about what long COVID is and how it's impacted you specifically in regards to your health and your type 1 diabetes?
Yeah, well, first of all, Nicole, if you're listening, I would love to talk, because I think something I'm missing, which is funny, I'm creating, or like I have this huge community of people with diabetes that I'm providing for, but I think that I need someone to provide for me a community for long COVID, because I don't really have that, and it's isolating. Wait, what was the question?
You're like, can we back up? Yeah, no. So I think first off, like a lot of people don't even know what long COVID
Okay.
is. I know when Nicole shared it first, I was like, what is that? And when I heard about it, I was like, wow, that sounds really, really tough. So what is it,
Okay.
and how has it impacted you with type 1
Yeah, I
diabetes?
think that long COVID has been the toughest struggle I've ever had over cancer and type 1 diabetes. I got COVID in July 2021. And after that, I noticed like every 5 to 6 weeks, I would have just like this fatigue and fever spell for like a few days. And at first, I attributed it to like, oh, I moved to New York and there's all these new germs. And then I realized that it was very consistent. And I started thinking, like, I think I have long COVID. And then a year later in August, I got sick, like the same kind of thing. And then I went to Burning Man, which is like, you shouldn't go to Burning Man if you're not feeling well. But I like Burning Man takes so much work and money to create. It's a city that just is built from nothingness, with I think like over 70,000 people in the middle of nowhere, Nevada. Very intense conditions, 100 degrees, dusty. You have to wear masks, like there are dust storms, and you're riding bikes everywhere. So I put my body through a lot. And ever since then, I never came out of this like fatigue that I guess exacerbated by this experience that is 100% attributed to like the long COVID that's kind of been in my system. So the what I've been experiencing is fatigue, pressure in like my head, tension in my shoulders, low grade fevers almost every single day, so between 99.1 and
Wow.
100.1. And all of that has highly affected my mental health and caused severe anxiety and depression. In fact, anxiety is a symptom of this. I was diagnosed with POTS, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, which is something that 67% of people with long COVID are being diagnosed with. It's something I definitely had, but it's something that's exacerbated. It's like when you like change positions, your heart rate and your blood pressure can't really like level out the way they're supposed to. That causes dizziness.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm dizzy like often. I feel like just like in a brain fog. So these are symptoms that I have more often than not, I'd say. Although recently maybe like no, it's hard to really say how often I'm having them and not having them. I'd say more often than not, I'm having them, and it's hard for me to tell if I'm getting better. Which after a year of nonstop symptoms is very um, difficult, and I've been able to deal with it with medication, really, and which also makes me sad because I'm just not the I don't feel like the same person that I am in some ways. Um it's really affected me, and it's really it with my diabetes. I think that I'm affected most with that because my highs and my increases and decreases of blood sugar I feel very intensely if they're somewhat steep. And then high blood sugars, I really feel worse than I used to. And low blood sugars, I feel a lot worse. Everything's exacerbated. So it's just made my diabetes more, affect my health more, and just feel like crappy, honestly. I haven't had a normal day in over 11 months. I haven't felt like a normal person. So it's been really tough.
First off, I'm so sorry that you're going through that. I can't even imagine what that's been like, and I think that there's not enough probably research on that, not enough understanding of what is needs to be done to solve that. And um, oh man, yeah, it sounds like connecting with Nicole could be a good place to start, so you guys can bond over that. I will tell you, we had a little bit of like a New York City Risley meetup recently, and I was sharing with the girls that I started taking these supplements because for about the past year, I've been having like 2:30, 3 o'clock through like 5:30 p.m. My brain fog was just so terrible. I could not focus. It was impacting like my work, my productivity. I was waking up at like 6 a.m. and starting work at 6:30 because I knew it was like I was chasing the clock before it got to like 3 o'clock because it was that bad. And I started taking these supplements. And I don't want this to like, this is not, medical, consult your doctor. We have a disclaimer at the front of this episode, but you know what I mean? Like these supplements helped me so much. And like am back to kind of my baseline before whatever happened a year ago. And Nicole turned to me at the table and she was like, oh my God, she's like, this is what I started taking for my long COVID and it's made such an impact. So I'll send you the link of them too. They're beef liver supplements, and I've been pescatarian, so I haven't eaten any meat for I think like 13 years now, just fish. And I think that might have had something to do with it for me. But these pills, I had to realize like, okay, like, like I'm an ethical whatever pescatarian, but I was like, okay, I don't want to do harm to like animals as much as I can, but like I'm doing so much harm to my body, so I have to figure out a way to like supplement a little bit. And it like literally helped so much more than just taking B12 on its own or iron, all these things. So once Nicole said that, I started going down a rabbit hole, and apparently it helps people from so many different, just like with energy, with apparently long COVID, with all of these different things. So I don't know, maybe look into it and ask your doctor about it, or just do your own research, because Nicole was speaking very highly
Well,
of it.
just like what happened just now is why community is so important, and why I was like, I need to talk to Nicole, is because being able to share what works and what doesn't work can help us move faster and smarter in our journey of whatever we're experiencing. I definitely want to link from those. I just started taking like turmeric supplements, and I can't really, they're supposed to help with inflammation, which is basically long COVID is like inflammation throughout your entire body, essentially, which makes probably like the fevers so bad, or consistent. But yeah, I mean, I need to find my community a bit and figure out what's working for people. And I have hope that because long COVID's affecting so many people throughout the world, it's like a worldwide situation, and COVID's still here. They say 1 in 10 of infections cause long COVID, not 1 in 10 people. So if you get COVID 10 times, odds are you're going to have long COVID. In fact, it's possible that have you had COVID?
I had it 3
So
times.
it's 100% possible that what you were experiencing was a light form of COVID, a long COVID. And I know so many people that are saying, ever since I had long COVID, I have way less energy. And people are like, oh, you're getting older. It's like, no, this was overnight. So
Wow. Wait, now I'm like questioning. I'm like, wait, that could have been, because it started about a year ago. I was attributing it to maybe like deficiencies, but if all the other individual supplements weren't necessarily working for me, why did this beef liver pill that I went down a rabbit hole of finding and then taking like be the thing that worked? I mean, it's insane. I feel like my teenage self again, and like where you just have so much energy to go and do and I want you to feel that. And I'm not saying like this is like, I'm like, I hope this supplement works for you, but like maybe it's like one thing that could be part of a bigger solution for you. So
yeah,
anybody I hear has it.
oh my God, please. Yeah. I get long COVID burnout. That's what I get. So, yeah, no, that would be amazing. I'm looking for things to help.
Okay. And if anybody else is interested, I'll put the link of the ones that Nicole and I use in the show notes. But okay, let's end on a positive, Justin, to wrap this up. Let's do a speed round. We'll end on something light. So we have a few questions here. Okay. Are
I'm
you
ready
for this? All right. First thing that comes to mind. What is your go-to low snack that you bring with you when you're leaving the house?
Now it's applesauce, organic applesauce. I feel like it's the healthiest one.
Those are the ones that
They're
that I
amazing.
use. Little twist off cap. I always have fun in my bag. Okay, how many times per week do you finger prick while being on a CGM?
1 to 3 times.
1 to 3 times. If you had to guess a number, how many times a day do you think you check your CGM?
75 times.
75 times.
That's a lot. That's a lot.
Accurate.
Maybe like, yeah,
really?
Honestly.
I feel like it's more.
Yeah, I mean, 5 times an hour.
5 times an hour. Yeah, I would say. I was never good at those guessing games of like how many gumballs are in this, or how many horses are on the wallpaper. I was always like 500,000 off from.
It depends on what I'm doing. If I'm really busy, very little. If I'm drinking, a lot. Like it really depends on what I'm doing.
Yeah. I'm curious to know. Maybe we should do that as just like a fun experiment. Count how many times we try to look. All right, last one. Leave a piece of advice you wish you were told when you were diagnosed.
Ooh, that's tough. A piece of advice. Well, my advice is like, I did it, but no, okay, just cut that out. My advice would be that it's going to be okay and you're going to live a very normal life. Like, I want to tell myself in that car when I was crying over insulin that it's going to be okay.
Everything is figure outable, and if Justin could go to Burning Man with type 1 diabetes, then we could all figure out how to live our daily lives. Justin, thank you so much for coming on Reclaim Your Rise. It has been an absolute pleasure. I feel like we could have recorded this for like 3 more hours and just continue to talk. I'm so excited to come on your podcast next week. Justin, can you leave where everybody can listen to you and find you after?
Yeah, sure. I have a podcast and a YouTube channel. To find me, it's Diabetech, Diabetech. And on social media, it's Diabetech. _TECH.
Wonderful. Thank you again, Justin. Have a great rest of
Of
your
course,
day.
thank you.
Thank you so much for being here with me today and listening to this episode of Reclaim Your Rise. To let us know that the episodes we're putting out are impactful and to help us get our street cred up and let everyone else know that this is something worthy of their time to listen to, please leave a rating and review on our Apple Podcast, send the show to other people impacted by T1D or maybe even your doctor, and share it on social media tagging @Risley Health and @Lauren_Bongiorno. New episodes of Reclaim Your Rise come out every single Tuesday, so make sure you are subscribed to the podcast so that you never miss a beat. Thanks again for listening, and as always, remember, diabetes is a challenge that we did not choose, but one that we can rise above.